Before they were killers, they were kids. Before they were a cult, they were just a group of lost souls hitchhiking through California in the summer of love, chasing something bigger than themselves. But under the haze of free love and psychedelic freedom, something darker was brewing. They thought they'd found a prophet. What they got instead was a puppet master with a god complex, a guitar, and a hunger for chaos. This is the story of how Charles Manson turned peace and love into fear and murder, and how a cult with no name became one of the most infamous in American history.
People say I'm no good, but they never do they say why their world is so mixed up, or how it got that way.
Charles Manson was born in 1934 to a teenage mother in Cincinnati, Ohio. From the start, his life was one long rejection letter. His mother was in and out of prison, and he bounced between relatives and institutions, racking up petty crimes and time in reform schools. By the time he was in his early 20s, prison felt more like home than the outside world. But it wasn't until he got out in 1967, during the peak of the counterculture movement, that Manson truly came alive. He landed in San Francisco right as the Haight-Ashbury scene exploded. LSD was flowing, hippies were hitchhiking, and everyone was looking for meaning. Manson saw an opportunity. He reinvented himself as a guru, a mix of Jesus, guru, and rock star. With a soft voice and a hypnotic stare, he started drawing in drifters, dropouts, and vulnerable young women. He called them his family, and they called him Charlie. The Manson family wasn't a cult in the traditional sense. There were no robes, no compound, no official doctrine. Instead, they lived a nomadic lifestyle, driving in beat-up school buses and squatting in abandoned buildings. Eventually, they made their home at Spahn Ranch, a dusty, decaying old movie set in the Los Angeles hills. It was the perfect backdrop for Manson's Wild West delusions.
2 years ago, the hippie commune led by Charles Manson moved into this old Wild West film set just outside Los Angeles. And it was here that they were living on the night the alleged murders took place.
They had some bedding back there, and they seem to live pretty comfortably here.
What do they do for money, and what do they eat?
Well, they just as regular as anybody else, and of the whereabouts of the money mostly came from the girls, because the boys didn't work. The girls did most of the money getting.
Were you at any time a member of this group?
Well, I can say that I was, as far as being here and as far as living.
You're not a little.
Break with them then after this.
Well, because of their belief, and I have my own, you see.
What specific beliefs are you talking about?
Well, of all the free things, and I believe that the people that work for nothing have nothing, and I believe in working and creating for myself.
His followers, mostly young women, many of them teenagers, adored him. He told them what they wanted to hear, that they were special, chosen, and free from the world's judgment. In return, he demanded total loyalty. That loyalty was enforced through a steady stream of hallucinogens, group sex, and psychological manipulation. If someone questioned him, he'd ridicule them, isolate them, or make an example out of them. And if that didn't work, he'd twist their doubts into proof that they needed to let go of their ego. But Manson wasn't content with being a guru. He wanted to be a star. He played guitar, wrote songs, and even befriended Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. For a while, it looked like Manson might actually get a record deal. But when that dream collapsed, so did the illusion, and the family began spiraling into something far more dangerous. By 1969, Manson had shifted from peace and love to paranoia and prophecy. He told his followers that a race war was coming, one he called Helter Skelter, named after the Beatles song. In his twisted worldview, Black Americans would rise up and kill all white people, but wouldn't know how to rule afterward. That's where the family came in. They would hide in the desert during the chaos, then return to lead the new world. It was delusional, racist, and completely detached from reality. But to the family, it was gospel. And honestly, to sit there and say like, oh, black people are going to rise up, they're going to kill all the white people, let's go hide in the desert because they're not going to know how to rule, so we're going to come out of the desert and be like, oh, don't worry, black people will rule. That is incredibly racist. That's crazy. Manson's control over the group had grown absolute. He created a hierarchy with himself at the top and used LSD to keep everyone else emotionally pliable. He administered bad trips to those who questioned him, mixing in fear with enlightenment. Followers were encouraged to erase their identities. No mirrors, no personal names, no thoughts that didn't serve the collective. He referred to himself as both Christ and Satan, depending on his mood. Which I think is also kind of crazy that, oh, I'm both. Like that, immediately it hits me with psychotic, mental, bipolar, I don't know. The family lived by a strict routine of breaking people down. New members were love-bombed and tested. One day you were told you were perfect. The next you were punished for not being empty enough. Manson used isolation, humiliation, and sudden outbursts of rage to keep everyone on edge. He'd pit people against each other, forcing confessions and obedience drills that blurred the line between loyalty and fear. And the more the outside world rejected Manson, especially the music industry, the more he needed to prove he was still in control of something. That's when the philosophy turned into violence. He started saying it outright. The race war wasn't going to start on its own. They'd have to ignite it themselves. On the night of August 8th, 1969, Manson gave an order. Go to that house where Terry used to live. Kill everyone in it. Make it witchy. Witchy meant brutal, unpredictable, unexplainable. It meant murder as performance, meant to shock the world into chaos. The house at 10050 CeeLo Drive had once been rented by Terry Melcher, the record producer who turned Manson down. But by August, Melcher had moved out. Living there now was director Roman Polanski and his wife, Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant. Manson didn't care who was inside. That night, 4 family members, Tex, Susan, Patricia, and Linda, climbed the hills toward the house with a revolver, knives, and a rope. They entered around midnight.
In a scene described by one investigator as reminiscent of a weird religious rite, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant and was found in a bikini-type nightgown with a rope around her neck attached to the body of a man. Among the other victims were Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring and coffee heiress Abigail Folger. Authorities would allow no one in an unofficial capacity inside the posh $200,000 home in the hills overlooking Los Angeles. Polanski, who directed Rosemary's Baby and other films of suspense, reportedly is in Europe.
The first victim was 18-year-old Stephen Parent, a visitor who had been leaving the guest house. Watson shot him 4 times through his car window. Inside the main house, they woke the others and forced them into the living room. Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski were all tied up. Watson told them, "I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's business." Over the next hour, the scene devolved into chaos. Frykowski tried to escape but was shot, stabbed, and pistol whipped. Abigail Folger fled outside but was tackled and stabbed 28 times on the lawn. Jay Sebring was shot and stabbed protecting Sharon, and Sharon, pleading for the life of her unborn baby, was stabbed 16 times. Before leaving, Adkins wrote the word pig in Sharon's blood on the front door. It wasn't just a killing, it was a message. The following night, Manson decided the message needed to be louder. He chose a new house almost at random, belonging to Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a wealthy couple living in the Los Feliz neighborhood of LA. This time, Manson went with them. He entered the house first, spoke calmly to the couple, and reassured them that nothing bad would happen. Then he left. The family did the rest.
The owner of a small supermarket chain found in his home his head covered by a white hood, a meat fork stuck in his chest. His wife, 38-year-old Mrs. Leno LaBianca, found in the bedroom dead, her back brutally cut by a whip. On the refrigerator door in the home, smeared in blood, were the words, "Death to pigs."
Watson, Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten entered and tied the couple up. Leno was stabbed 12 times with a bayonet. A carving fork was left in his stomach, and the word war was carved into his flesh. Rosemary was stabbed 41 times with 2 different knives. The family smeared messages on the walls: "Death to pigs," "Helter Skelter," intentionally misspelled. It was ritualistic, deranged, but not chaotic. Manson wanted it to look like a revolution. What he really did was solidify his cult's descent into ritual murder. The LaBianca killings weren't spontaneous. They were theater, obedience dressed up as ideology. In the weeks following the murders, Los Angeles was gripped by panic. People in Hollywood installed new locks, bought guard dogs, and traded rumors. The LAPD had no suspects, no fingerprints, no witnesses willing to talk. It looked like a professional hit, but nothing connected. 2 different crime scenes, no clear motive. Meanwhile, back at Spahn Ranch, the family spiraled. The atmosphere grew tense and erratic. Manson became increasingly paranoid, suspecting the police were closing in. Members who once felt invincible began to crack under the pressure. They buried weapons, burned evidence, and tried to act normal, but nothing about them ever really was. Their eyes were vacant, they spoke in riddles, and in private, they couldn't stop talking about Helter Skelter. The break in the case didn't come from a homicide detective. It came from a jail cell. Susan Adkins had been arrested on an unrelated charge and placed in a women's detention unit. There she began talking, bragging, really. She told 2 inmates about the murders in graphic detail, describing how Sharon Tate had begged for her baby's life. One of the women told a guard, as she should have. The confession changed everything. Once detectives realized the connection between Atkins and the Tate house, they started pulling threads. Linda Kasabian, who had fled the group earlier, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Her testimony was the linchpin. She laid out every detail: who drove, who stabbed, what was said, and what happened afterwards. It was chilling, coherent, and undeniable. In December 1969, Charles Manson and several of his followers were arrested and charged with murder. The media descended on the story like vultures. The man who couldn't get a record deal was suddenly the most famous name in America. The Manson trial began in mid-1970, and it was unlike anything the American legal system had ever seen. From the beginning, it was theater. Manson entered the courtroom with an X carved into his forehead, later evolving into a swastika. His co-defendants, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten, followed his lead, echoing his gestures, his language, even his outbursts. He wasn't just on trial, he was directing a performance. Outside, a rotating group of family members camped on the courthouse lawn. They held signs, they chanted, they threatened witnesses, and one member, Lynette Squeaky Frome, or Fromm, famously held a knife to a reporter's throat during an interview. Another attempted to set herself on fire. It was a circus of devotion, and every act was meant to show that Manson still had control, even from behind bars. Inside the courtroom, prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi was methodical. He argued that Manson didn't need to wield the knife. He had weaponized belief. Through Kasabian's testimony and the words of Manson himself, Bugliosi laid out how Manson's philosophy of Helter Skelter wasn't just weird, it was deadly. The Beatles' lyrics, the apocalyptic predictions, the racial war, it all culminated in murder. Manson's defense was pure chaos. He demanded to represent himself, then hurled insults at the judge. He blamed society, the music industry, the government, anyone but himself. At one point, he leapt across the defense table screaming, "Someone should cut your head off." When the guilty verdict came in, Manson smiled. The family women sobbed and sang. They had been sentenced to death, but acted as if they had won something. In truth, their lives and the American psyche would never be the same again.
Go ride a horse. Go ride a horse. Feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad. Open them. I'm not against you, huh? Are you bitter? Bitter? No.
Manson died in 2017, still proclaiming his innocence. He never showed remorse. He never broke character. To the end, he called himself a prophet. Some of his followers did show regret. Leslie Van Houten was granted parole in 2023 after more than 50 years in prison. Others remain locked up. Some still speak as if they're under his control. The fascination with Manson never really ended. Movies, books, documentaries. He became a symbol of evil, manipulation, and the fragility of the human mind. But the real horror isn't that he existed. It's that he found people willing to follow him. That's what lingers. The Manson family wasn't just a cult. It was a crack in the facade of the 1960s. A moment when peace and love gave way to chaos and fear. The murders marked the end of the counterculture dream, the end of innocence, and the beginning of a deeper national distrust. Charles Manson didn't kill anyone himself, but he didn't have to. That's what made it so terrifying. He showed how easily a single person could twist others into doing the unthinkable, not with guns or money, but with words, manipulation, and belief. The family wasn't made up of monsters. It was made up of daughters, friends, and dreamers, turned into executioners through slow, methodical, psychological control. And that's what makes the Manson story endure. It's not just about one man. It's about how cults work, how people fall under their spell, and how belief, unchecked, unchallenged, can turn deadly. This is cult classic, and we're only just getting started. As we move forward into this, there's theories about Manson being involved with the CIA and FBI, and I believe he said he was involved with the FBI himself. Might dive into that a little bit more in the future. Don't know. We'll see what you guys think. But in episode 11, again, we do cover the psychology of a cult leader, psychology of a cult follower, and how to spot the red flags. So stick around for that episode, drop a subscribe, and as always, sources will be down in the description and coming up after this. And thank you for watching.
No. I have a question. Are you guilty of any murders? Are you guilty of plotting any murders?
I killed a chicken once.
Any human beings?
No, no.
You're absolutely innocent of any conspiracy to commit murder, or telling anyone to commit murder, or planning it?
I'll plead guilty to the Indian.